And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall focus on issues in basic education and later on discuss Finland court judgment on Simon Ekpa.
All right. The Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education in Imo State has established guidelines for graduation ceremonies and also textbooks usage, stating only primary 6 graduating pupils and senior secondary school 3 graduates are permitted to hold graduation ceremonies.
And on textbook usage, approved list of textbooks are designed to be used for a period of 4 years, allowing pupils and students to use the textbooks of their siblings for 4 consecutive years in Imo State.
So this policy, according to the Imo State government, is to ensure that students, parents and guardians, as well as stakeholders and schools, focus on the academic achievement of pupils and students at the end of primary and secondary cycles.
And in a related development, management of the Ministry of Education in Benue State has also adopted some policies with a view to emancipating the masses by freezing customized education materials such as text and exercise books. That is non-transferable at the moment to subsequent learners.
In addition, compulsory and extended lessons after normal regular school hours cease, except, of course, at the consent of parents and guardians, and that's in Benue State.
Similarly, the Sokoto State government has abolished signing-in ceremonies for graduating secondary school students in public and private schools, citing misconduct of graduating students and vandalism of school property that trail such events.
So ahead of the 2025-2026 school session, all school graduation ceremonies are abolished for kindergarten, primary and junior secondary schools in states like Imo, Benue, Ondo, and of course, more states are likely to take the cue. It's a very interesting topic it's going to be, considering that some of us, had experienced some of the issues raised by the state governments. For instance, the usage of textbooks, and all of that. So I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. We will have, all the stakeholders to give us the different perspectives to the issue. Once again, welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. I am Claire Adilabu Abdulrazak.
But Claire, when you talked about the 2025-2026 academic session, that doesn't resonate with you, but for me, of course, preparation is in top gear.
Yes.
School fees and all.
That.
All right. I'm Yan Ray John. Many thanks for joining us on this very special Tuesday. We're live on the network service of the NTA, and we're reaching you right. All right. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. And just before we get into our conversation this morning, which is on basic education issues arising, let's take a look at this background report put together by our correspondent Ibrahim Bello Gunda.
The governments of Imo, Benue and Ondo states have implemented decisive measures to tackle concern by many parents and education stakeholders, which is extravagant graduation ceremonies in nursery, primary and junior secondary schools. The government scrapped graduation ceremonies at the kindergarten, nursery and basic school levels, insisting that the practice is unnecessary and often financially demanding on families. The states also banned the use of customized textbooks and exercise books, as they are not transferable to other learners. They also urged schools to revert to the traditional practice of passing books from senior students to their juniors to reduce the financial burden on parents. The government also banned compulsory extended lessons after normal school hours, stating that such lessons should only hold when parents give explicit consent. They emphasized that strict compliance is expected from both public and private schools in the affected states. In a related development, Sokoto State government also announced a ban on all signing out celebration for graduating secondary school students in both public and private schools, with authorities linking the decision to rising cases of misconduct and vandalism associated with such events. Should the policy be replicated nationwide to reduce financial influence on Nigeria's education system? How will this decision shape education in affected states? And why are more people clamoring for the review of practices that are gradually becoming part of Nigeria's education system without due regulation? These and more will be some of the questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be sharing their thoughts on the program.
All right, welcome. Thank you, Ibrahim Belugunda, for that background report on issues in the basic education sector. Seated in the studio for our conversation on this issue, let me quickly introduce Dr. Saleh Mamale, who is a public affairs analyst and also himself an educationist, and we're glad to have him live in our studio. Dr. Mamale, thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians.
All right, I think we also have, go ahead. All right, we have joining us via Zoom from Owerri is Professor Bernard Ikewoha, who is the Imo State Commissioner for Primary and Secondary Education. And of course, he's joining us via Zoom. We'd like to thank you, Professor Ikewoha. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
And from Makode, also via Zoom, we have Nambative Helen Zeramo, who is the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education and Knowledge Management, Benue State.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Very much. Yere.
All right. Also joining us for the conversation via Zoom from Makode is Honorable Sunday Afa Uju, Benue State Chairman, National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools. Many thanks for joining us, sir.
Good morning, viewers.
Right, and joining us right here in the studio for the conversation is Stella Maris Omu, retired principal, Federal Government Girls College, Buhari, and director of an NGO. Many thanks for joining us, ma'am.
Good morning, Nigeria. Go ahead, Henry.
All right, so we get into the conversation, and I would like to begin with our guest in the studio. So I'd like Dr. Mamale, to speak to us. The background I already spoke, to some of the issues arising in basic education in the country. From where you're coming from, I mean, what you experienced as a young Nigerian going through school, and what is presently obtainable, would you say we're headed in the right direction?
Okay, thank you very much again to the Nigerian Television Authority. I think this is a rising topical issue for the country and which need to be given the adequate attention. And it is pleasing from your background report and what has been happening in the mainstream media. Many state governments are taking proactive measures, which is what is needed to address some of these issues. If you look at the background report, I think 3 issues have been raised. One relates to the conduct of young students graduating at different levels of basic education, right from the primary, junior secondary, and into the senior secondary schools. We have seen a lot of behaviors that are unruly during some of these, immediately in the aftermath of either completing their examinations, whether JSCE or SSCE. We have seen some of these wild jubilations that have gone violent, where a lot of young students graduating have been injured and issues arising associated with that. The second one relates to the conduct of especially private schools during graduation ceremonies. We have seen us going very high, turning some of those simple graduation events into jamborees, where parents are being made to pay high rates of money, gowns, huge celebrations have begun to occupy our landscape for simple things like graduating of primary or junior secondary school or secondary school students, which it really ought to be moderated. And we are happy that some state governments are taking proactive measures to moderate some of these behaviors, particularly by private schools. The third one relates to the use of books in our educational institutions. We all know that textbooks are very important in learning, in teaching, and they are fundamental. We knew, like you asked me, when we were in the primary schools and in the secondary schools, we used to have what we call the school library. And almost all the textbook you need for every subject are available. And they are available in sufficient numbers. So what normally used to happen is if there will be a lesson of mathematics, the mathematics teacher will go to the library. If he have 30 or 25 students in his class, he will sign for 25 textbooks. He will bring them to the class. He will distribute or circulate them to the students or pupils. They will be studying it and he will use it in teaching them. And at the end of the lesson, he collects these books and take it back to the library. When the students have assignments, they go to the libraries and they use these books. And there was what we used to call overnight assignments, where children might need to make use of those books at home. And in that cases, they were given those books while they are leaving school, and then they are all registered. They use it overnight under the guidance of their parents, and the next morning they bring back the schools after completing the assignments, and these books are returned back to the library. So you find that one set of textbooks could be used for as long as 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, without being damaged. Students were taught and were oriented to use books very well and to respect the sanctity of that material called a book, because it's one of the most valuable resources. So we have seen a significant shift in this practice and a rise towards monetization.
So for you, the ban, for you, just to wrap it up, for you, the ban is a welcome development.
It needs to be regulated, not extremely banned in that context, but a framework, modalities, and a system of using books should be developed.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring in the Commissioner for Education, Primary and Secondary School in Imo State, who is joining us via Zoom. That's because the Imo State, was probably the first state to take this policy action. Professor Bernard Ikewoha, who is the commissioner, and Professor Ikewoha, I'm just wondering really if under fives, really need to wear, the cap and the gown, just to show that they have succeeded in learning to spell apple or ball or cat and dog and all that. But what are your concerns in taking this action? What were your major concerns?
Thank you very much once again. The credit actually goes to the governor of Imo State, most distinguished Senator Dr. Hope Uzodimma, for appointing me in the first place and giving me free hand to make sure we do what is necessary to make sure we have quality and functional education in Imo State. What formed our decision is a collective decision of the directors in the ministry, supervised by myself, was the fact that I attended several graduation ceremonies, and I even saw toddlers, if I may use that word, in kindergarten graduating. Upon inquiry, I found out that some of them paid as high as 65,000 naira. Kindergarten we are talking about, not to talk of nursery. So we came to the conclusion that this exorbitant amount paid by parents must be regulated, particularly at the kindergarten, nursery, and junior secondary school 3. In our judgment, they are supposed to be commencement, not graduation. By commencement, I mean they are actually commencing the real education. So somebody in junior secondary school 3 is not terminating the education cycle. Rather, that person is commencing with senior secondary school. We looked at the economic factor, the burden, financial burden placed on parents. And you know, in this part of the world, we have parents who are actually struggling. Those with about 3, 4 children, assuming you have 4 children in JSS 3, and you have to pay 100 and something thousand for graduation. Look at the total amount that parent is going to pay. So we looked at the cost on parents. That's the second reason that formed our opinion. The third one is we know actually that book reviews are done every 4 years. It is a national policy. And if book reviews are done for 4 years, which means every textbook is supposed to last for 4 years. But what we have seen is that private schools, some, not all, because I don't want to generalize. There are still private schools that are very, very cautious of the prevailing economic situation that most parents are going through. But some of them do start textbooks every year. I know of somebody who has 4 children paying close to 150,000 naira every year only for textbook. And the following year, when the son moves to a higher class, the daughter goes into a lower class. He has to buy the books again. This is not right, because when I went to school, I used the textbook of my seniors, even though they are seniors from different families. They just gave me their textbooks, or I gave those who are coming after me from another family my own textbook. But in this case, every year, parents must buy new textbooks. So we looked at also the cost implication, and we decided we were going to abolish this. Textbooks are to be in place for 4 consecutive years. Let me say this about private schools. Private schools are partners in progress in the education ecosystem in Imo State, and I believe also in Nigeria. They do quite a lot. They close the gaps where public schools cannot. You know, due to paucity of funds, we don't have too many public schools.
Okay. Professor Ikewoha, thank you. We've gotten the main, your main concerns, and like you said, you've listed quite a number of them. I also like to take the same question, the same conversation to Benue, that also rolled out this policy. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education and Knowledge, that's Nambatif Helen Zaramo. Madam, I'm also wondering what could be the reason and concern of Benue State, or were you just joining the bandwagon? The reason and
Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, the studio. What formed this decision was the general outcry from parents and sponsors. The general public were demanding to know the regulations on multiple graduation in schools. The Ministry of Education management sat and looked at the complaints and decided that graduation should remain to be with certificating class as it used to be. Therefore, the two graduations approved were the end of 9 years basic education. That is upper basic and the completion of senior secondary education. That is SSC.
All right, many thanks, Madam Helen Zeramo. Would get back to you, to understand why Benway, came up with what they did. But for now, I would like to hear from the chairman of the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools. I mean, the concerns have been stated clear. And the blame, or rather, some of these complaints are on what the private schools do. Speak to us about what informed the change of textbooks to workbooks, such that they are no longer reusable. Is it a policy that was that was determined by the ministry, or the private proprietors just decided that they needed to get students, or rather pupils, to buy books every year and not hand down books to younger pupils? So speak to us really about all of this. And from my dictionary, a graduation is supposed to be a ceremony that is conducted when a degree is awarded. So you want to ask why nursery, kindergarten, primary, and the rest would be taking part in graduation ceremonies.
Thank you very much, viewers, and all the learned colleagues at the studio. I'm very happy to be invited for this discussion. My name, rightly put, is Honorable Sunday Ada Ojo. Sunday Ada Ojo. I'm the state chairman of NAPS, Benue State. And I want to really agree with some of the earlier contributors and also differ a little. For instance, there are two issues here. The first issue is the issue of transferring textbooks to younger ones. What we have engaged our pupils and students is the use of workbooks. And workbooks are individualistic in nature. It's not what you can transfer. As field and the teachers have marked all the answered questions. Is it right to transfer the same workbook to the younger siblings? That's a question that we have to consider. Then the second one is that at the beginning of every section, the private schools are handed down list of textbooks. And this list of textbooks are supposed to be complied with. In many of our rural schools, you hardly find the resources to get all of these books. And as I speak to you, most of this clamor and cry is on schools that are in urban centers. But in rural, we're only managing to help train the Nigerian child for the government. For instance, look at Benue State. In retrospect, we have over 80% of schools are in the private sector section. And so what we have done here is to call regular conference meetings and educate them on how to run their schools. But there's a trend. There's what we call social dynamics. There's a trend from Europe. Some of the rich proprietors here, they have schools in Europe, in America. And so they see what is obtainable in those areas, in those advanced countries. And they are trying to bring part of it. For instance, there's a school in Abuja that offers robotics robotics. And I do know that federal government has not included robotics. But the level that the parents and the school management have reached is as such a subject can be of good help. So when we see educational evolution, we cannot stop certain things from happening. But I agree with earlier contributors that some of the excesses should be checked. For instance, graduation. You all know that children in our days, we don't care about all of this. It does not matter. But in the contemporary Nigeria, students have been so motivated. A little thing motivates them, including character formation and exposure. So when you tell when a kindergarten child wears an academic gown, that child sees the future. That child sees he or herself growing to become a graduate in the future.
Many thanks, Mr. Ojo, but I would like to stay with you based on some of the comments that you have made. I hope the connection is still okay, because you talked about list of books. First, most private schools no longer give list of books. Rather, they charge parents for the books and they provide the books. And you talked about workbooks and all of that. How is a mathematics textbook a workbook? So in the past, like Dr. Momale said, of course, I also use that. You have mathematics textbook, which is concrete. And then maybe you have a qualitative workbook or whatever that you can now do your solving or whatever you need that is not transferable. But for the maths textbook or your English textbook, these books could be transferred to the next class. But this is what you see is, even in your main maths textbook, you have to fill in your answers within. Who determined that change? Who made that? I mean, why is that now obtainable for that? Then he talked about, graduation ceremonies, a motivation. If it's a motivation, why is it at the expense of parents? Because we saw in that report that parents are being charged exorbitantly, for these graduation ceremonies. You're asked to provide a lot of things and then also pay the school for this. Is this a motivation for the students, or it's a financial motivation for the schools? I think the connection with Honorable Ojo is a bit not steady at the moment. So I would like Madam Stella Maris to respond to some of these issues.
Thank you very much. I want to also thank the speakers before me. Graduation is like he said, is at the end of an achievement in the education sector, and then you get either a diploma or a degree. But for the trend we now find in our primary schools or kindergarten, nursery, I don't think it's needed. I don't see it as a motivation. If you look at the mandate for schools to run and for learners to have quality outcomes, a child in kindergarten is not graduating because the child is still going to be in that school. You are not giving the child a certificate. The child is transiting to another level, and that level is nursery. And when the nursery child also transits, either into grade 1 or elementary 1 or primary 1, as the school may choose to describe them, there's no certification for the child to leave. The child still remains in that learning environment. So the hue and cry over graduation, I think it's just a fad. Many parents want to see their children in the way that they did not achieve. That's what I want to believe. Because some of us went to higher institutions. And for some of us, it was not even a hype to go for the graduation ceremony. Once you knew you had passed, you were just going. But for little children, you put them through that stress of going through wearing the cap and the gown and all kinds of ceremonies and events, while some of those parents are actually struggling to pay that amount of money, but they just want to belong to the Joneses.
And some schools it's compulsory. If you do not pay, then...
Some schools is compulsory. But I want to think that with what is happening in many of the states, there should be stakeholders buying into the decision to ensure that all schools across board and all schools across the different levels are complying, and to bring compliance into functionality. The education sector should make sure that the implementation of whatever policies are coming are actually followed.
What about the textbooks? What are your thoughts really? Because I've seen some of these books myself. You have places where you feel textbook, I mean mathematics, English, science, whatever it is. In the past, they were just things you could read and then, solve elsewhere. But these days, they are made such that you're supposed to feel your answers within. When did this happen? And who I don't know, how was it determined?
The Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council is the body that implements that policy for book publication. The authors and publishers of these books, I cannot really say if their presentations or their publications went through that authority. Because in the past, even when I was growing up, we had workbooks different from textbooks. And while I was seeing the schools where I was principal, we had textbooks and we had workbooks. Parents too had complained in later years that they didn't want to buy textbooks, but we insisted they should buy the workbooks. Textbooks are supposed to run for 4 years. And then when they are re-edited or reviewed, then there is a change in the 5th year. I know we have passed textbooks from one family to the other. I know parents have come to ask me, can I have the books for your children who have left secondary school or primary? And we gave them those textbooks. They just had to go and buy the workbooks. And some of these workbooks that are embedded in the textbooks are either pirated or they're not good quality. And so you find every year they're buying that book again. So for me, the NERDC should ensure that the book policy is the same, whether it's for public schools or for private schools, because they're all Nigerian children. I wanted to, just before Henry brought you in, I just wanted to just point out that for me and Madam Stella, it's roles reversal. I used to be at the receiving end of her lessons, in those years. So she had the tough task of teaching me. I hope I learned well.
You did. That's why you were here.
Thank you. All right. So let's look at, we're having two issues: the textbook ban and the ban on graduation. If we look at this, or situated within the UBE Act of 2004, which of course provides free and compulsory education, for children. That act also mandates all stakeholders, the school, the local government, parents, teachers, to ensure that pupils and students complete their school course. I'm just wondering if the ban on school, Dr. Momade, if the ban on school graduation, can it not be argued as contradicting the spirit of the act?
Thank you very much. I think graduation is completely a different issue from education or educating a person.
But it is part of a process. Yes. It marks the end
of basic education.
Yes.
And that is what Madam just explained. There is what we call transition, and there's what we call graduation. In basic education, the concept is there is no graduation until the completion of junior secondary education. So whether you're in nursery school, whether you're in kindergarten, whether you have finished 6 years of primary education, you're just transiting from one level of education to the other. So I think reasonably, we can best say in Nigeria that somebody is graduating from the first level of education when he completes his senior secondary school certificate examinations. That is SSCE. So all the other levels, you are just transiting from one level of education to the other. And I think it is very useful for us to recognize this. And I think both the speakers that have earlier spoken, the commissioner from IMO, I think he raised a very fundamental issue. That of even molding the character of the young people. There is, and then the issue raised by the chairman of the private schools, preparators for Benue, that of motivation. I think there should be a balance. We should not go to extremes, and we should be moderated. Even the class parties, the end of year class parties, within schools have become something else today. So there is a lot of, like I said, picking up very extreme positions by some of these private schools, making end of class years parties very expensive, very extravagant, you know, putting a lot of burden on the parents. That's one. Again, raising the hope and motivation of the children too high beyond the normal societal levels. Why should children be celebrating so much at that lavish level at every end of year? What kind of values are we instilling in these young Nigerians?
You know, you said earlier on that you were not out for total ban.
Yes.
It could be regulated. It could be moderated.
Exactly.
Yes.
And here, the parents, we call them SBMCs now, the school-based management committees,
yes,
the education resource centers, the local government administrations, the private schools owners, and the governments at the state levels must come together, sit on a round table. And I think that's from what the chairman just mentioned. There's need for more round table discussions. And I think this is very critical. To address these issues, put up a policy framework and bring out an acceptable level of doing everything, both in the public as well as in the private sector. And importantly, on the books, I think she has made the point. There are a lot of substandard books, and many private schools are publishing these books. It will surprise you that if you pick some of these school textbooks by the same publisher, published last year, he will, if they come to this year, they will alter the placement of the sections and chapters, so that the book is, in terms of content, is the same, but what you find in week 3 is what you go and find in week 7 in another year.
Just so
it's therefore substandard, because education should be focused and continuous, and every lesson should build on the experiences of the previous lesson. So there is, in terms of the education resource, when you're putting up a curriculum, you have to start with the lower level, even within the same subject, within the same term. You start from the lower level and keep building the knowledge up to the end of the session. But what these books now do is they alter this level. And therefore children have distorted learning. And therefore there is no quality delivery. And I think our education resource centers, our schools management and monitoring mechanisms must ensure the strict compliance to quality textbooks. And we must distinguish textbooks from workbooks. And then we have exercise books.
That's
why the students, exactly, that's why the children have exercise books.
I remember.
So exercise books are also different from workbooks. They are different from textbooks.
Yes.
So in many cases where you have, like he was talking about the rural areas, where people cannot afford the workbooks, that exercise books are there. So the most important one is the textbooks and the exercise books of the students.
I remember in those days, I'm sure Madam Stella, you remember as well, we used to have integrated science, yearbooks, and we had, book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. You also had the
workbook.
Yes, workbooks accompanying them. So even when you use the workbooks, the main textbooks, you can hand over the main textbooks, and it goes like
and
that.
And the workbooks were cheaper. So it was not really a burden, right? The textbooks were more expensive, which you could hand down, for many years. But for the workbooks, they were just, something you could pick up.
And schools could have textbooks. It's not compulsory for every child to have a textbook, especially
let's just invite. Yes, sorry to interject. Let's just invite the viewers, because I'm sure that a lot of people will want to be part of our conversation. This is something that affects almost every parent and every home. The number to send your messages is just out there. It's on the screen. It's 081-696-88126. Again, 081-696-88126. We quickly would like to hear what you think and, of course, your own view. But let's get back to where Professor Bernard Ikewonha. Again, you've heard the comments on the banning of both graduation and the textbooks. And again, I'd like to refer you to the Act, to the UBE Act of 2004, which mandates parents especially to ensure the completion of basic education for their children. Now, in effecting total ban on graduation, as you may call it, is that not infringing on the right of the child and of the parents' ability to fulfill that aspect of the law?
Thank you very much. What we did was holistic. We involved all the stakeholders in making that decision, including NAPS. Surprisingly, in Imo State, we have two factions of NAPS, but I engaged them individually because I wasn't ready to be part of their politics. I engaged them at least 5 times on individual level. We collectively agreed on that. One faction did not agree, the other faction agreed. Yes, it might look like we are infringing on the rights of the pupils and students. But we consulted extensively. Parents agreed that this would be banned. NAPS also agreed that this would be banned. And of course, other stakeholders were part of the decision making. But having said that, one of the persons in the studio made mention of pirating of the textbooks. This is actually very true. And the NAPS chairman in Benue made mention of the rural areas of Benue. We also have rural areas in Imo State. List of approved textbooks are given to private schools. All they needed to do is to liaise with the publishers who, for the sake of commercialization and in tandem with the private schools, embedded the workbook inside it. When we provide the list, we did not say that the workbook should be incorporated into the textbooks. What we did was to make sure that the textbooks are what they are. Workbooks should be completely different. But they have failed to do that. Secondly, most of the textbooks published, you will see that the textbook published for one secondary school, called it secondary school A, has the same title with the one sent to secondary school B, but the content are different. So what we want to do is to make sure we regulate it so that they are standardized. With regards to graduation, nobody will tell me that you are motivating a 3-year-old child that is in kindergarten who actually knows, the child doesn't know much. That's not motivation. No. Even if you are motivating that child, you are motivating that child to know that at the end of every cycle, your parents have to bring so much money for you to graduate. I attended some, and you can't even believe the amount of food that was prepared by parents to serve to the totality and the entirety of people who came for the graduation. So you see that at the end of every graduation, a parent must have spent his or her life savings. We cannot continue in this trajectory. At any rate, I think we need to come back to the table, all stakeholders, NAPS, the ministry, and whosoever must be involved so that we can begin to review some of these things and come up with a commonly acceptable policy that will be acceptable to NAPS, acceptable to the education ministry. This is the way to go. You know, we are the pioneer of this thing. We are the pathfinder in this, and others have followed. The last count, I believe about either 29 or 30 states have joined. Have they joined in error? That's the question you must ask. They see the utility of what we have done, and that's why they have joined. NAPS, like I said, remains a partner in progress because they cover areas that we are unable to cover. We must carry them along. It is imperative, it is really needed that NAPS join us. But NAPS must realize that education is the vocation. It is not a means.
Honorable Commissioner, because of time, you know, we need to pause you at this point and get to Honorable Sunday Ojo, who joins us from Makudi. The ban is in place at the moment in your state. Speak to us about what the reaction is like from your fellow proprietors. And then what's the plan for this session? I mean, just a week away for the new session. How do you intend to go about resumption and the books that will be used by the pupils in your school?
Thank you very much. I want to correct one impression. I mentioned of societal dynamics. If you go to our societies today, practical, you observe that the way birthday parties are celebrated for these children runs into hundreds of thousands of naira. That is what the society has accepted. And so most of these graduation ceremonies that are being criticized now were accepted, were even proposals from parents, PTA. No school proprietor can implement anything except the PTA accepts. Then second point on the textbook review, we agree with government in total that textbooks should be separated from workbooks.
God bless you.
But we are in a situation where a child cannot afford the cost of textbook because workbooks are easier. So we also agree that there should be both textbooks and workbooks should run together. Then thirdly, the Honorable Commissioner mentioned that NAPS and other bodies were consulted. But in Benue, we were just told of this policy statement. And we are still digesting it. Because many proprietors have already printed their materials. And they have already arranged how this section is going to take off. And this preparation, in terms of cost, runs into millions of naira. So if suddenly you say nobody should use these materials again, it means you are running down the private school system. Because I may not have another opportunity, let me make this clear to Nigerians that there is need for the federal government to set up an agency that will monitor the progress and development of private schools in Nigeria. Because, you know, private school objective is different from public school objective. So anytime we model up the two, there's every likelihood of friction. And that's what we have in this case. Yeah, if you look at an average rural child, the parents are poor, they are in public school, they cannot afford this, afford that. That is there. But in private school, is qualitative education. Our objective is qualitative education. And so we want everything to be provided for the child so that the child can get the best. That's why these days, even the poorest of poor would want his child to go to private school, including those of you who are in the studio there. And you know, you can agree with me that private school has done a lot in this country. And we need
It's not just private school. Some of us didn't go to private school. I didn't go to private school. Mr. Ojo, I didn't go to private school.
And it was qualitative.
And it was qualitative. I went to, in fact, I have to say it, I went to a Jakonde school, a public school in Lagos. And we thank you. Let me bring in Madam Helen, the PS Secretary, Minister of Education and Knowledge. PS, I'm just wondering how you intend to monitor and ensure compliance with this new directive.
Okay. Is that the answer? I want to disagree with the views of the representative of NAPS. The right to print books is with publishers, not NAPS. The decision to abolish the customized exercise and textbooks will have no negative effect to private school owners. This is because Ministry of Education is taking a balanced decision which will be for the interest of parents, learners, and schools. The ministry is only enforcing its policy on the right usage of the books in schools. This is our statutory responsibility.
All right, many thanks, Permanent Secretary. We need to round up this conversation quickly. We'll get to the messages shortly. But you see, in all of this, government, I mean, what government is doing to regulate in terms of production of books, what the private schools are doing, of course, all the issues that have been raised. I'm sure our guest in the studio will respond to them. But let's just quickly take some of the messages that we have. And we hope that, we'll deal with all of that as we round up the conversation. This one says, God bless you all for the good work you people are doing. Textbooks now have exercises inside. And when a pupil uses the book and writes inside it, it will become hard for another pupil to use the same book. Also, they revise their books almost yearly. The question is why? And that's coming from Ogochukwu from Ebonyi State. This one says, good morning. Students can write in the textbook, in the notebook, which helps their hand grip and eye coordination for reading. These workbooks are most times not used completely. Thank you so much. Another one says, Abbas Abubakar Saad from Jalingo, Taraba State. Teachers must help children understand that moving to the next level is a normal part of learning, not a graduation. Pressuring parents to pay for elaborate graduation events at every level is unfair and unnecessary. It may even make children feel unloved if their parents can't afford it. Well said. Another one says, my contribution is that textbooks should be handed over to the younger ones, while the workbooks should be given to individuals at every session. This will help reduce cost. This is coming from Fedresk Academy. All right, good that this is coming from a school and a private school at that. Another one says, Matthew, a parent from Port Harcourt. My opinion is that kindergarten graduation parties should be totally scrapped because it is a way of robbing parents. Otherwise, the school should finance it. All right. Claire, you have some messages.
Yes, I do, Ian. And this is from Wyatt Gerard from Delta State. He says it's a very good move by these states. Only certificate class should be considered for graduation. Thank you. Good morning to UNTA. How can a parent of 4 children afford school fees, textbooks, exam fees, and so-called graduation fees every year? Buying textbooks every year to each student in each class is not easy, so the intervention is commendable from God's power. And this is from John Angels, Eckert in Akwa Ibom State. It's rather unfortunate that most schools are getting away with these acts, and this is because the Ministry of Education has failed in their responsibilities. The irony is that these schools pay peanuts to their teachers despite these exorbitant school fees and unnecessary burden to parents and guardians. Njoku Christopher, I used my senior brother's book, for example, in primary 5. I used it, but today it's not the same. Can you people explain that? And then lastly, Mogaji Bako Kala FCT. The ban is a bold step and a welcome idea. If the government will do the needful, kudos to government. Kudos to Imo State government for taking this initiative. Other state governments that have not done this should do so. That is the right way to go. Alaji Dawood, all the way from Lokoja,
That spoke my mind. The FCT should take a cue quickly.
All right, I think we have 2 minutes, so we just you ask one, I take one. Okay.
All right, as we round off, I speak to what you think government should do in all of this, because I mean the regulation rests with the government. Yes. If we have the books that should be used, the proprietors of the schools have no choice but to to follow. And then of course regulation of the private schools. Who determines what they do? Are they being regulated in any way at all? Is it because it's a business venture?
The
they do what they want?
The curriculum is there. Standard curriculum set by the Education Resource Centers. It's their responsibilities of the Ministries of Education and the appropriate regulatory agencies to govern and ensure compliance. Books are not published by schools. Books are published by publishers. That system we should go back to that system. Private schools.
Who should monitor the publishers to ensure they do the right thing when publishing, just so that they are not...
Yeah, once it's a standard publishing company, I don't believe any standard publishing company will publish a substandard book that is not approved by the appropriate regulatory authorities. But substandard or pirated books or books printed by individual schools, anything can go there. But no publisher that is certified publisher will publish substandard books. So that is why when you go back, if you think of the Longman, can you imagine Longman printing substandard books? It's impossible, So they are there. And then the regulators must wake up. And I think our media organization should support us and should support some of these positive policies.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have to give you the last minute to speak. I'm just wondering, is this aligning with global best practices in any way?
It's a hard one, because I do not really think that in other climes, this thing about graduation from that kindergarten to nursery, it's a thing that is hyped. But I know that in some countries, once a child gets to high school, the child graduates. That's our SSE graduates. And in that climb where they are graduating, when they finish, they're actually going to something more productive. They have that qualification of high school that makes them get anywhere. And they begin to do some hands-on or any other thing that catches their fancy, that brings them into a vocation. And going back to the book thing, it's the same way. Books are recycled for as long as they've not been mutilated. But if I want to go by what Dr. Mahmood has said, I hope I got the name right.
Momale.
Yeah, Momale. The regulatory agencies are there, but it's just for government to have that, always use the word political will, to ensure that they do what is needed. At the state level and the federal levels, you have government, they have the Quality Assurance Department. The Quality Assurance Department has a lot to do in all of this we're saying.
Okay.
They should be able to go from time to time to monitor and evaluate the system to see that what is being done is what is supposed to be implemented from the policy in place.
All right.
Thank you.
Right, Stella, thank you very much for your perspective. I'd like to also thank Dr. Momale. Thank you very much. I know the time is not really enough to deal comprehensively with this topic. But let me also appreciate the Commissioner for Education, Imo State, Professor Bernard Ikewaha. Thank you. Mr. Adaujo, thank you. And Madam Helen also, who joined us all the way from Makodi, thank you. I think we all arrived at the same, consensus. This is not the way to go. There must be a meeting point, and of course, the regulators should sit up and, of course, do their job of regulating the type of books and where it is sourced. All right.
All right. Many thanks for remaining with us. It's still